for me. So
well, it's like raining here, so it's all dark, and I'm home by myself, and I had to like make sure Kaysen had everything he needed, so he'd hopefully leave me alone for just a little bit.
Yeah, I was telling Ashley, I think Annie's gonna join us, so it could get fun. But hi everyone, welcome to November's book talk. And this month we read "I Work at a Public Library" by Gina Sheridan. And so because of that, we have a very, very special guest that I am so excited about. And we have Ashley. I'm going to the right because that's where she is, but it's opposite. In the Bookish realm. And she is a librarian. And so she is a wealth of knowledge. But aside from just that, like, if you are not subscribed to Ashley, go do it now, because she talks about things so well and succinctly. And I love your live streams. I never make it, and yet I still watch them later because I love it. You are just a very, very intelligent, well-spoken lady. So welcome, Ashley, and let's just go around and introduce ourselves.
Go first, Ash.
Okay. Is there anything in particular I need to say? Just my name, channel?
Yeah, okay. Whatever you want.
So I'm Ashley. I am from the Bookish realm. I've been on BookTube for about 6 years now, like 2014. So it's been a while. I am a public librarian, and I specialize in youth services, but more heavily in team services. So my population usually is between the ages of 12 to 19.
And you're in a city, correct? You're not rural.
Well, I mean, for all technical purposes, yes, it is a city. I feel like it's just a big town, but yeah, by the size of the county and the number of people that are in the county, we are classified as being a part of a city.
Cool.
Awesome. Sarah from the Bookish Knitter on YouTube and Instagram. Hi, everybody.
And hi, I'm Bree, and I'm on Instagram at Falling for Romance.
Right. So I guess, Ashley, have you read this book?
I have not.
Okay. It's a Kindle Unlimited, maybe 150 page book. Mm-hmm. And what did you guys think about it, Bree and Sarah?
It was cute.
Yeah, it was fun. I thought it was fun.
Oh yeah, it was definitely. I had no problems with the book. It's just there wasn't really much of a plot or anything. It was just a lot of interesting random stories about working in a library, and I really did like it for that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was funny. So basically, what this book is just random, like, kind of things that this librarian has encountered at the library, and some of it is universal to like jobs and life in general. Mm-hmm. Like, we all have weird stories of things that have happened, but some of it, like, I was reading and was just laughing because, like, does that really happen?
You wouldn't think that happens. Like, when I go to my library, it's like, it's so quiet, you know, and I'm just like, what library does this lady work at?
Yeah. So Ashley, you're shaking your head. So does a lot of like crazy stuff happen at the library?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it definitely gets crazier depending upon the type of library that you work in. So I would say maybe not so much when you start looking at like academic and stuff like that, because there's limitations on who can come in the building. Public libraries, it's a free for all.
Yeah.
So anybody can come in at any time. And in the time that I have been working for a library, I have seen and have heard some crazy things. I mean, from being cursed out to having situations where I've had to call the police. It gets real. Yeah, it gets crazy at a library. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my gosh.
She mentioned in the book was like librarians are used to bullies. Like, people will come in and like slam their hands down and talk crazy.
Yeah.
It's like at the like librarians are.
Like, I'm just trying to help you with literacy, guys.
Right?
It's the entitlement part of it that gets kind of crazy. So you'll have people who come in and they feel and they feel super entitled about certain things. So that's where it comes in, and people are like, I need this right now. Why is it not here? And I'm like, it's a library, not a hospital or an emergency room. You don't need it right now. Yeah.
Right.
So it's strange.
Is the majority of like people that come in, are they for books or are they for this like technology and that kind of thing?
It depends on what areas you're working in. So I've worked at 2 separate locations, one where it was more literacy heavy, and working in a location now that's definitely more technology, like computer use help, or what we really classify as like social services, like applying for jobs, resumes. We've helped people get food stamps. We've helped people get housing. So it really depends upon the population. And this is all within the same county.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to ask, because from reading the book, you do get the sense like the library offers way more than just books. So with COVID times, how is that affecting all of those, like access to programs like that?
So we're not doing a lot of libraries, to my knowledge, and this is just from me talking to other librarians and then kind of looking at what we're doing with our system. A lot of people are not really doing a lot of in-service stuff, meaning like in-service, like programs where people can come in and do stuff. Most libraries at this point are open up for computer usage because we just could not stay closed anymore. It just was not feasible for us in our communities to stay closed. But it makes things super tricky because we can't sit down like we usually would do with patrons, sit down and help them with a job application. So we've come up with unique ways. Some people have laser pointers. Some people have had access to programs where they can actually remote into a patron's computer and help them that way. We try to do as much as we can, but we create like limitations in terms of like how many people can be in the building. Everybody has to have a mask on. It's extremely different and it's super complicated. And this is probably the most, I don't want to say stress because I don't think stress is the right word, but this is the most creative I think I've ever had to be in my position, to be honest with you. It really is, because you want to help people and you want to provide the same services, but it's so different you can't.
Right. Yeah. It's exhausting.
It is. It's super. And I didn't realize how exhausting it was until we started. Now we're phasing into doing limited services and kind of being partially open. And I didn't realize how mentally exhausting it was until this month. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so drained. I mean, it's a good thing because you're trying to come up with ways to help people, but the creativity that has to go into it when someone's like, I have to do a job application, and you're like, yikes, I don't know what to tell you. And then you add in the factor, like for me, I work in a community where computer literacy is not there. I mean, literally, people don't know what a cursor is. When you say, take your cursor, they're like, you're what? Or you have people who don't know how to type. It makes things 10 times more complicated.
Yeah, that is very hard. And as far as like checking out books and stuff, is the workload more or less when it's all like requesting and that kind of thing?
It's about the same, but I think depending upon who you talk to and at what location, it varies. So if you have a location that's like high literacy, I mean, you have a community that constantly checks out books, you're probably going to see a little bit more of an increased workload in terms of holds. But like in my community, no, we're seeing an increased workload in trying to figure out how to get people access to computers,
right,
and how to help them operate on computers when they have no computer literacy.
Man.
Wow. Is that something I'll learn in school?
What, this right now?
Well, like
probably not.
And it's like, this is going to be, because one of the things that she says in the book is like, I got my degree in library science and I was not prepared for this. And I'm like, Ashley probably was not prepared for COVID, the apocalypse.
Who was?
It's so different because I got my degree after already working in the library. So it made school easy for me, meaning that like I didn't really have to work as hard in school because I already had the experience under my belt. I think that if you go the opposite way and you go to school first without the experience, it's not going to prepare you. Because when I say every day is different, and that's what I love about my job, is that no 2 days are ever alike. you never know what you're going to walk into when you get to work. I mean, I joke about it and I think it's funny now, but like I went to work and it was a normal day until someone was like, hey, somebody who's not supposed to be here is here. Can you tell them that they have to leave? And I have to do it because I'm a supervisor as well. So I didn't expect to go to work that day and get cursed out and get recorded and say that they were going to call their lawyers. I mean, clearly there was some issues there in addition to that. Yeah. But library school prepares you for the technical stuff. So like the reader's advisory and learning about how literacy works, especially when you're looking at stuff like youth services, it teaches you how to build effective programming. But for the everyday people skills, no. Yeah. I don't think you can be taught that through a textbook or someone telling you experiences. You have to go through that yourself.
Mm-hmm. But you have to, I mean, especially nowadays, have to have a library science degree to be a librarian. Is that correct?
Yes and no. It depends. A lot of the stuff that you see in libraries, we're not as, I think people think we're a lot more cohesive than what we really are. Every library system does things differently. And a lot of discussions are happening right now because they're noticing that a lot of BIPOC groups are not librarians. And that has to do with accessibility to getting your master's in library information. You know, people of color are going to be less likely to get their degree in or get a master's in library information science. So some libraries are transferring over where you do not have to have your degree. But for the most part, most libraries are still functioning where, like, if you want the professional title of librarian or manager or director, you have to have the library degree behind you. For me, it was crazy because I got my degree, I got my position, and then they were like, we're not requiring it anymore. And I was like, I just wasted so much money. Why? And I remember actually talking to our library director. I was like, why did this happen? But it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of conversation because a lot of people are not necessarily open to it. But I think it creates an avenue of accessibility, if that makes sense. It's tricky, but I think it's a good direction that a lot of libraries are headed in because it's going to create more diversity in who libraries are hiring. And that's especially important in certain communities where they need to come in and they need to see at least one or two people who look like them.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, because I think the perception of a librarian is that we all can get a mental image of what a librarian is and that they help you check out books and that's about it, and it's like this book was helpful, I think, in that and just illuminating how much librarians do.
Actually do. Yeah.
Is it something you always knew you wanted to do, or at what point? Because I know you got your bachelor's, you did history, because I bug you all the time about history stuff. But at what point were you like, I want to do this? Because I'm like, librarians have always been cool, but I never realized like they had master's degrees. They deal with like conflict resolution on a daily.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was a career change for me. I actually have 2 master's degrees. I have a master's degree. I'm certified to teach. And I have my master's in library information science. And for me, it was a career change because the politics of the classroom can get very, very tricky. And it was burnout. Yeah. It was honestly burnout because I was putting in hours from like 7 a.m. Until like 7 o'clock at night. And I just couldn't do it. I would call my mom every day crying, like, I just don't think I can handle this. So it was a career change for me. And I was like, what do you like to do? What is something you enjoy doing? And I was like, oh, I love to read. I'm going to apply for a library.
Exactly.
Stupidest mindset to have. I mean, I love my job. This is this is where I want to retire from. But I also feel like the concept of thinking, oh, I like to read is the equivalent of being a librarian is faulty. And I had to learn that the hard way. And it is a very difficult career to get into. I actually applied 3 times before I got a position.
Wow.
And the third time I was actually interviewing for 2 positions at once. And I quickly learned that it is, part of the aspect of it is reading and doing reader's advisory. But I mean, everything from people calling in and, hey, can you check the weather for me? I'm like, what in the world? Check the weather?
Yeah.
The weather, like, or people coming in, I need to fax this document, or hey, I need to make copies, or I have such and such and such. Like, who do I talk to? I had some guy sit down with me once, and we were going on, it wasn't Google Maps, who was it? Google Earth. And we were looking at some property because he needed to figure out some questions, some answers about some property that he was working on. So it's a lot more tricky. And I think I went in with the wrong idea, honestly. I think I thought, I love to read. It's something that's my passion. I love doing that. And but once I started working for probably about 6 months and realized how much work we do with communities, I was like, okay, I think this is something that I can see myself doing for the rest of my life. And then that's when I decided that I was going to go back to school for it.
What grade did you teach? What grade did you teach?
I taught high school, econ, psychology, and what else did I teach? No, I just taught econ and psychology. I taught AP psychology, IB psychology, regular psychology, and economics.
Ooh, that's so crazy.
Why are you
burnout?
I don't get it.
It's the craziest
thing. And Chloe was a kindergarten teacher.
I taught kindergarten, which is the opposite of that. But we, like, our first year, there was a cohort of us that were first year teachers, and we were like, can we just get hit by a car so we can get a break? Like go spend a week laid up in the hospital just to get a break, because teachers' jobs never end. And I mean, right now, that I'm sure they're experiencing so much.
Stuff like you wanted like books and stuff for your class, but you had to like fund it yourself.
Oh, gosh, yes. I can't tell you how much money I spent out of pocket, just because I didn't have the appropriate amount of money that I needed. And then it was tricky because, I got my bachelor's in history and I did my teaching. I got my master's in teaching. I did a year program, which is the stupidest thing I've ever done. But I did social sciences. So that means I could have taught anything. And I was expecting to teach world history. A week before school started, they were like, oh, never mind, you're teaching psychology. Mind you, I had never taken a psychology class, y'all. Never in my life had I ever taken a psychology class. Never. And they were like, yeah, we need you to teach psychology. And I was like, what? And then econ, I was like, oh, I hate econ. I was like, I know nothing about psychology. I hate economics. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these kids? Right. So literally, that was my experience as a first-time teacher, and I was miserable.
Well, and it's not like they give you a curriculum, like, here, teach this. It's like they give you standards, and they're like, here, figure out how to get this across, and we're going to test them to this point that is like makes people pee their pants.
And I mean, high schoolers and kindergartners are assholes. Yes, know what you're talking about. They're going to call you out on it.
Yes, they probably made me. I feel like now I have a tough skin, and I feel like I have a tough skin now because of them. Because I've been called every name in the book. You can't teach. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, your first year going through that, you're like, your self-esteem gets knocked down a couple of notches.
Yeah. And the kindergartners are just like brutally honest about everything, which I'm sure we all know from any experience with kids. They bust you out on like, that you're looking a little fat. I mean, everything.
They haven't got a filter yet.
No filter.
We had a question. What's the situation regarding lending books and having them returned? So I've done it once with my library. Chloe, you've been doing it, right?
Doing what?
Getting physical library books? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think here they are like you turn it back in and they quarantine it for 2 weeks, which is fine and good. But they're not cataloging it obviously until that 2 weeks is up, and they still have all of their alerts on. So you're like getting late fees, but then late fees don't matter. So they have forgiven all late fees. So I don't know. I think they're, at least here, it's still a work in progress.
Oh, that's interesting that they're doing 2 weeks. We don't do it. We're not doing it as long.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How long
we
is
are
it?
only doing it. We are only doing it for how many days are we doing it? I think 3 or 4.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yep, 3 or 4 days, and that is it. If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to get my hours right, but I think it is. It's 4 days.
Well, and the 2 weeks makes anything new release. Like, I think I have something that's like 10 months from now is the estimated time because
Mhm.
calculating it 2 weeks, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. It is. It does slow everything down in the collection because everything has to be
Yeah.
quarantined. And I mean, you could end up waiting for something for a while. Even if somebody, like you said, turns something in on time, it just takes so
Right.
much. And then that's such a the organization that goes behind that is
Yeah.
that is crazy too. That's been a new twist. And it's like, well, how do we keep this stuff organized? Like if we have people return stuff or we have people put it in the book drop, like how do we organize what's been turned in and how long it's been sitting and when to check it back in? And it's been, I mean, everybody has had to pull together and put their minds together to figure this thing out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with genres like romance that have something come out every day, how do you as a librarian know or prioritize what you're going to order?
So that's a little our system is super big. So we actually have a separate department. I know that there are library systems. There's a library system in the county that's right next to me where their individual libraries are able to purchase their items. Our system is so big that we cannot do that. So we have an actual collection development team that is responsible for purchasing the materials. And honestly, it's one of those things where a lot of times when they buy stuff is based off of popularity. And the times in which we get stuff that may not be as popular or word hasn't gotten out as much about the materials is usually when patrons have been able to request stuff, but that's a little bit different. So we've been able to request that they buy stuff internally, but for the most part, a lot of what they do buy is more popular stuff. Everything has to have, of course, professional reviews attached to it. So we can't, we won't buy anything that doesn't have any professional reviews tied to it. And I think they look at things based off of what their budget looks like as well. I don't know all the specific details about what they do in terms of purchasing because it's not my department. But for the most part, from what I've seen, if you want it, we could probably get it because the budget is big enough. But with COVID, that because it has become a point for a lot of libraries where they're trying to maintain their funding so they can pay their employees. So that means that other areas have been getting cut. And then a lot of libraries now are investing their finances into ebooks. And those are expensive. And that has been, I'm glad Macmillan has kind of backed off and they completely backed off. But that was a serious issue for us pre-COVID. And I think the only reason why Macmillan backed off of what they were doing with the ebooks was because of the fact that COVID happened. And they knew at that point, like, putting an embargo on libraries, first of all, was just messed up in general. But during a time like a global pandemic, it just would have been even more jacked up.
I remember I would get like a message on like Libby and it would say something about Macmillan. I mean, it's been so long now, I don't remember what it was, but I was just like, dude, really?
Yeah.
Wait,
so all
what
libraries
happened with Macmillan?
So what ended up happening was, and it was so interesting because I kind of was on both sides of it. Because as being on BookTube, there were opportunities to work with Macmillan on that side. And then I kind of was like, Macmillan was doing a really crappy thing in the library. So I kind of felt caught in the middle. But Macmillan had made the comment essentially that libraries were taking away from their income for their authors because we were being able to purchase a license for an ebook and essentially pass it around. And it was detracting from the income that Macmillan would have had if we were forced to buy a copy for every single person that was using that book. What's crazy about this is that Macmillan used data from Tor. Tor is such a small imprint of Macmillan. It's highly specialized. It's only science fiction and fantasy. And they used data from that imprint to justify why they wanted to place it was either a 6-month or an 8-month embargo, in which we were only allowed to buy one copy of a newly released title. And then after the embargo, we were allowed to buy more copies. But I think we had to buy that first copy at full price. And what that created was an issue for people who work in libraries, because libraries are all about accessibility. We want to make sure we can provide as much materials to as many people as we can. And by doing that, especially in large cities and large counties where you had a lot of patrons, if you had like James Patterson drop a new book, or Debbie Maycomber, because goodness gracious, in my library, she's like this. And that's crazy, because that's the only reason why I know about her new releases and keep up with them, because I think I've only read 1 or 2 of her books, but I keep up with them because of patrons. If they were to release a new title and we bought an ebook copy of it, we were only allowed to buy one. And because they're so popular and they're household names, you could have 100+ people waiting for one copy. There were times when people would be waiting up to a year just to get access to one book. And for us, that was problematic, because not everybody has the finances to go out and buy a new release. They don't have the finances to buy an ebook. They definitely don't have the finances to go and get an e-audio copy of something. So Macmillan was trying to justify that we were stealing. In more layman terms, they were saying that we were stealing money from them by providing patrons with access to e-ready copies of materials, and we were taking away from their authors. So what you were seeing, Bree, was that a lot of libraries started, especially on like Libby and Overdrive and on their websites, they were putting links to a petition for patrons to sign, saying that this was unfair. And there were libraries who were saying they weren't going to buy anything from Macmillan. It didn't matter what imprint it was coming from, because they felt like it was just wrong that they were doing that, and that they were trying to say that libraries were hurting them. And if people don't know, I don't know how many people know this, when you check out an ebook copy, okay, that's a license. The library doesn't own that. After a certain number of checkouts, we have to repurchase that book. So sometimes you may see a library book that was available to you, and then all of a sudden it's no longer available as an ebook or e-audio copy because we have made a decision not to repurchase it. That's a lot of money to spend on ebooks, because it's not just the one book, it's a license for it to be continued passed on from one individual to the other. And the number of checkouts on the license is not as high as people think it is, especially if it's a more popular book. You're going to have to end up purchasing that book over and over and over and over and over again. So really, we were ending up paying a lot of money. I just feel like people always try to have these conversations about libraries being obsolete and we're not needed. And it was just very, very disrespectful. It was a huge slap on the face from Macmillan. And granted now, because when the pandemic started, they rescinded their comments and they said, you know, the embargo's no more. But actually seeing that embargo in place, like I actually got to see what the embargo was doing, was just, it was awful. It was very, very harmful to a lot of communities.
Yeah. So when you're talking about popularity, how is that determined on, like, is that on, I mean, what is that determined by?
Popularity usually is determined by circ numbers. Okay. So the higher the circ numbers are for item, the more popular it is. In circ numbers, we look at physical checkouts as well as how many times an ebook has been checked out, how many times an audiobook. And honestly, I feel like popularity can also change from location to location within the same system. But I know for us, just working at working with a population that was very much so into reading and checking out stuff. I mean, our typicals were definitely Debbie Maycomber, James Patterson. Stephen King really is not as popular in the library world, I think, as people think. Like, I know he's a big name, but I never really saw a lot of his stuff checked out. Like, I think, honestly, the people that you see on the New York Times bestseller list are the ones that move quite a bit. I mean, the same old names that you see over and over again are the ones that in our system I see the most movement from.
Oh, I bet Debbie Maycomber, Nora Roberts is
Oh
probably.
yeah, Nora. Yeah, Nora stuff. And it's so interesting because I always say stuff like so many authors that I think I don't read, but I'm very familiar with their catalog because I work in a library. And it's like, yeah, I've never picked up a Nora Roberts book, but I can tell you a little bit about what she's written because I'm so used to people calling, can you get me the latest Nora Roberts book, ma'am or sir? Do you happen to know the name? No. Okay, well, let me Google and check. And so you get kind of used to doing stuff like that.
So who is it that pushes any sort of like diversity in what you carry? Is it you as librarians?
Yes. We just actually had a whole conversation about this in a meeting about, especially with everything that's been going on within the past 6 months. There has been huge discussions within a lot of library systems of making sure now that even if materials are not necessarily ones that are highly marketed or popular, they're pushing now to make sure that at least half of what they're buying are diverse titles with diverse characters and diverse authors. A lot of times too, that can come down to individual librarians. Like for me, I intentionally only request stuff within my teen collection that has diversity or some type of representation because I know the community that I'm working with. So now it's a huge conversation, but it's always been, not always, because that's a lie. it's a huge lie. But I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked about it with y'all, but we are taught in school, especially when you're working with children's literacy, you're taught this concept called windows and mirrors, especially with kids. Yes. So Chloe, you're familiar with it.
Well, I just watched your video and that was
So basically they teach us that you want to create collections where, and this is specifically for kids. I don't know too much about adult services. I didn't focus in on that. But for us that work with youth, they teach us that you want to have your collection in the concept of windows and mirrors, meaning that you want materials where the kids can see themselves in books, which is the mirrors. And then you want them to have books where they can experience different people, different cultures, races, ethnicities, nationalities, and that's the windows. So you want to have a balance. You don't want to create a collection where they are just seeing themselves because that's not the real world. But then you don't want to create a collection where they don't see themselves because that's also not the real world. So you try to create some sort of balance, which is what I try to do. And a lot of libraries highlight certain things. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like, they called end caps on the part of shelves where they kind of display books front facing. Yeah. So all that stuff is intentional. We do it in the sense of, we call it marketing, even though you're not really buying anything, but it's a way for us to get materials to move. So when you see displays in library, all of that stuff is very intentional to persuade people to check out different materials than they would normally go for, whether that's based on a theme or a holiday. For big holidays like Valentine's Day, Black History Month, all that stuff, you'll start to see displays that are reflecting those holidays because they want those parts of their collection to move.
Yeah, because I mean, I was thinking like if we're looking at New York Times bestsellers and things like that, and like pre-sales, it's likely pretty just the same people, the same kind of whitewashed, not diverse, with maybe the occasional one thrown in, but yeah, that's very interesting. Antonella, I don't know if you know her, but Nora is the Taylor Swift of libraries.
Her and Debbie, let me tell y'all, I didn't think about it, and it's just so interesting just like seeing it now, but it's true. They really are extremely popular in a library world. And just looking at their circulation numbers is crazy because I'm able to look at a book and see how many times it's circulated. Because a lot of times that's how we determine whether a book needs to go, like whether we need to get out the collection. But yeah, you'll see some crazy numbers on some of their titles. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this book has circulated that many times. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about that. Like, how often does the library unhaul books?
Oh, we do all the time.
Really?
All the time.
And
Yeah.
where do you send them?
Do they unhaul them?
Yeah.
So when
How do we get on that list?
So when we unhaul based on condition. And usually it has a lot to do with the number of times it's circulated, because you want to make sure that your collection is pristine. You know, we always say when we have materials in our collection, is this something that you would want to take home to your own family? If you say no, it's time for that book to go. And when we unhaul them, a lot of times it gets into Better World Books. So when people are like, oh yeah, go order from Better, and that's where library books come from. Some of them do end up at, well, nobody's trying to scare you, honey. They just sitting there. A lot of times they end up at thrift books too, but for the most part it's Better World Books. And I don't think none of our books end up at our library book sale. I think most of them that we have at our library book sale are books that people have donated. Okay. So it happens often. Honestly, when you're shelving, you're always supposed to be weeding at the same time as well. So a lot of people don't know that either. They're like, oh yeah, you just keep. We do not keep. We don't have the space to keep.
Right. Yeah.
And we just can't do it. Now it does get kind of tricky. We also look at things like how many copies of the book do we have in the collection? Because if it's like the last copy, we don't want to get rid of it until we alert the collection development team, hey, is it possible for you to get another copy of this book? And then we're a little bit more mindful if something's out of print, because we can't just order any book. Well, for us, I can't speak for every library system, but for us, we can't just order any book that we want to order. It has to be able to come through our vendors. So like, for instance, I wanted to add Heartstopper, the graphic novel, to our collection, and we couldn't because our vendor wasn't selling it. So that means that that's just one that we possibly would never be able to add to our collection. So it's a little bit more tricky than I think. The most common things I see is that people say, well, you need to donate to your library so they can add the books to your collection. It doesn't work like that at all. It's a much nuanced process than that. I think maybe with smaller libraries, it may, but the bigger the library, the less likely they are going to be able to be like, oh yeah, just give us your books and we'll just add them to the collection. It really doesn't work like that. And then I also see like the comments that libraries could order anything that they want, and that's not true at all either.
Interesting.
Yeah, my library on base, they used to have a donation shelf, but it was like before you actually walked into the building, and it was like I could grab 3 and next time I could bring a bag if I wanted, but it wasn't actually in the library. But I thought that was really cool that they had that there.
Yeah. So we've got a couple people from different countries, and so they said our library card's always free, and yet, I mean, no, they're not.
It depends, and it depends on how you frame that question. So technically, if you live in the county, yes, because you pay taxes. Taxes are what fund libraries. But what it gets tricky is that every county and every city runs their they run their libraries differently. So I know some states where they have like tri-city cards, meaning that if everybody's within that same, with those 3 cities, you could all use the same library card. With us, we have a county that literally sits right next to us, and we do not share funds. So if you come from that county to our county, you have to pay. Or if we go from our county to their county, you have to pay. And that's because they pay less taxes than us. So our residents pay a certain amount in their taxes, and it's an estimation of how much they would pay in taxes a year. So that's how much we charge them a year for a library card. And because that county next to us, their residents pay less, it wouldn't be fair for our residents who are paying taxes within this county to have to end up in a situation where someone's using resources that technically they're paying for. So it varies, and I think it changes state by state. It looks different in counties, but if you're a resident of the city or town or county or whatever where your library is, yes, they're going to say you get a library card for free. It's when you start traveling and trying to get library cards at other places where it gets a little bit more tricky.
And at least around here, like you have to have a proof of address.
Yes.
And all that kind of stuff to get a card.
Yeah, you do. You have to have proof of address. And usually we just use your license. But if your license is in a different county, then we need something that has your name and your current address on it.
And up here, if you work in the city, like I work in Toronto, so I have a Toronto library card, even though I don't live in Toronto. So they allow you to do that as well. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that is nice. I wish we did something like that. I know we do something like that for our educators. Like if they work in our county, it doesn't matter if they live there. We let them have a library card. We do the same thing for students. It doesn't matter if they're from a different state or if they're from a different country. If they go to school in our county, they get a library card for a year, and then they just have to renew it every single year.
Yeah, I have to do the same. Renew it every year.
Interesting.
Be a really random question that's probably dumb, but like, do they still have libraries like in the high schools?
Yeah.
They do? Okay.
Yeah, they
I
do.
know with like funding and budgets, I'm like, is that one that they've cut out?
No, so they do because they have literacy standards for most of the high schools. And this is the high schools that I've worked with. But what ends up happening is that a lot of these high schools work very, very closely to their public librarians. So I work very closely with my middle school and my high school librarians because I have more money. So I can do a little bit more and I don't have the same constraints that they have. So there's certain things that they can't get away with doing because they have the barriers of the school system. Me, as long as it's not hurting anybody or it's nothing off the wall or crazy or inappropriate, it's kind of a free for all, which they just don't have that flexibility. And we can get more, like for me, I'm working with I was thinking about it earlier today. So I just got a grant last year, specifically for my teen programming, where I have a pool of money that I can pull from that I knew that my high school and my middle school, they were not going to see that type of money. So I purposely will make sure that if I'm doing anything, I reach out to them and say, hey, who are some of your kids that you know will benefit from this? Because I'm willing to blow this money on them. I have this money. I need to spend it. What can I do to help you out type of situation? They exist, but the parameters and the jobs of media specialists are so crazy that they can't always do what they want to do. Like my best friend is a media specialist in the middle school, and they do everything from technology classes, passing out laptops, going into classrooms, and they don't have time. And their budget is like, they have such a small budget. Yeah.
So in the times of COVID, since libraries are tax funded, has your funding changed at all?
No, and we're blessed. A lot of money. And I mean, it's all public knowledge. If like where I work, everybody in the public knows how much money we get. And they see when you pay your taxes, it shows you the line item of how much of your taxes are going to your public library. We've had to make adjustments, but I have been blessed enough where I've received my full salary and benefits since March.
Great.
So we've had to cut back in some areas. Most libraries went on a hiring freeze. But some libraries are just not as fortunate. I know librarians who got furloughed.
Yeah.
And some librarians who got laid off because they couldn't justify, especially in smaller towns, they couldn't justify paying the librarians and they weren't physically in the building.
Well, right. Like our library was shut down for months. I know it was, and completely nothing except digital sources. So I don't know if any librarians were furloughed or anything, but I would assume so.
Yeah, we were close.
I think it's so fascinating, and like I've looked into okay, if I decide I don't want to teach, I do librarian. But living in San Antonio, I wonder, not being a Spanish speaker, is that something I need to think of and need to be trying to pursue? Because a lot of our population here speaks Spanish. So is that something that they kind of, for depending on location, that you need to take into consideration?
Yeah, and another county that I'm familiar with, they actually ask, they say having Spanish as a second language or even a first language is a bonus because they work with populations that predominantly speak Spanish. With our situation, we have a population that speaks Spanish, but we have an outreach department that kind of works with those specific communities. But for some, it's not for us. I don't think we don't have a high population of Spanish speakers, just in general. But I know, in the county that I'm talking about, they do. So you'll see, like I said, on the bottom of their applications, they'll say Spanish is a plus. I haven't seen Spanish as a requirement yet, but I know that a lot of libraries are now like, if you have that second language, it is a bonus factor. And it depends upon where you live and how big your Spanish speaking population is.
Well, and if, like, based on what Ashley said about how much they help individuals, I would imagine to serve the community, it would be kind of necessary.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it definitely would be a necessity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a teen librarian, like, I mean, being in the book community, we know teenagers read, but it's also like a small population. So like in the real world, how are you keeping up with what they're interested in and getting that into the library? Getting some kids to read. I think one thing you said earlier is like kids should be able to go into the library and see someone like them, and like seeing you in there may convince a little Black girl like, oh snap, I should try, maybe reading is fun, So like, how are you keeping up with like what's hot in the teen world and important to bring into the library? Because I would have no idea, because I don't look for that.
BookTube, I'm gonna start here. BookTube is a very YA heavy community. And what's so interesting is that BookTube also as a community is very insular. So a lot of times we don't have to consider what's going on the outside. It's very easy to be like, oh, well, this is hot in the community. And then it's funny for me, and I usually don't say anything on it because I just don't, but it's funny to see like what's popular in the BookTube community. And then working on the outside, you're like, this is not.
Does it work?
No, like nobody cares about this at all. No, like things that are like that are super popular in the BookTube community. Like there's no wait list, there's no nothing, nobody's checking it out, and I'm like, yikes! This is very interesting. For me, I have to consider a lot less popular titles than what people think. So. For me, it's usually keeping up with Publishers Weekly, which is so crazy because the list is so extensive, and then having to research all of those individual titles is a lot of work as well. But that's pretty much how I do it. I would have to look at Publishers Weekly, and then I look at reviews. I look at like star reviews. School Library Journal is a huge one for me, even though I'm not a school librarian, but they're such a great resource. The Hornbook magazine is another one that I'm constantly looking at. So it's a lot of publications that are not known to the BookTube community that I have to look at when considering what titles need to be kept in the collection. It's not as easy as being in the BookTube community and being like, oh, everybody's reading this title, so we need it in the library. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So you mean you can't just watch BookTube and get paid for it?
No, I wish.
Well then, why be a librarian?
What are teenagers loving? Like, what books have you bought in that like just kept going off the shelf?
I work in a community right now, which is crazy. It's not crazy, but it's realistic. I work in a community where literacy is low. So I'm super invested in getting things like high-low books. And high-low books are books that are high interest but low difficulty. So I have high schoolers who are only reading on like a 4th, 5th, or 6th grade level, but they don't want to check out children's books or middle grade books because nobody wants to take that to school. So I really have to pick out materials that are interesting in terms of content, but not difficult in length. A lot of that is like Jason Reynolds is a huge one. Walter D. Myers is older, but a good one. And comics and graphic novels are a big one too. Hold on, y'all.
Yeah, let's give Ashley a break and completely like change course a little bit. This book had so many funny stories and crazy things and all of that. So I want to know, what were y'all's first jobs? Because I feel like no matter who you are, that's a funny story, whatever your first job was. Sarah, what was yours?
Mine was extremely Canadian. I worked for 4 years at Tim Hortons, which is the donut shop up here. It's like if you guys ever saw the movie Wayne's World, the coffee shop that they went to that was based off Tim Hortons, which is like our national chain. And
you still love them. You still go there.
I go because of Garrett. I won't go because I don't like them.
Okay.
Because you work there or because you just don't like it?
I have to give them money and I don't like them because at the beginning they were fine. It was actually really fun. And it was funny. I have so many stories of like great customers and like my dad, like I'd call home and be like, I'm on my way home. And Dad would go say to my mom, what do you want? Tell her to get me a coffee. And then on Sundays, we used to make cakes in the store. And on Sundays, they would throw out whatever was still there. I can't tell you the number of weeks I brought home like a Black Forest cake on a Sunday. Like that, right? But I don't like, they've now like upped the ante and now over the summer they were doing burgers. You're a coffee shop. Like, please don't.
Yeah.
And it's a whole thing. I am not, but I've always in a way worked in customer service.
Ooh, I think Dairy Queen. I love Dairy Queen.
House Mistress, Dairy Queen. My friend's family owns a Dairy Queen franchise. Like, I guess that's a thing. And so she worked she doesn't like ice cream. And I think it's because she worked there for so long.
I love it. I want some Dairy Queen.
Well, fast food is a thing.
Taco Bell.
Babysitting and camp counselor and then Kmart fashion department. That's funny.
Is Kmart still open?
I don't know.
There is one in New York.
Okay. Catering for a family business.
Awesome.
Wait, Sarah, you had Kmart in Canada?
No, we used to. Not anymore. They've been gone for a long time.
Yeah, I haven't seen one in a while. I miss their Christmas, the layaway.
Do you guys still have Pier 1?
No, they started closing those.
They went bankrupt, but I think now they're doing only online because, like, I know they're still a company, but I don't think they have any stores. Mm-hmm. And their coffee cups. Oh, I didn't bring it up. Their coffee cups are my favorite, like their Christmas ones, and I loved them. And no more.
Chloe, what was your first job?
Well, I mean, like I did babysitting and stuff for my family and that kind of stuff. But my first like real job was a hostess at a barbecue place. I'm a vegetarian. But I had a bunch of friends that worked there. So I was the hostess at a barbecue place.
I worked at Burger King one summer.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I learned nothing.
Yeah.
I could put drinks in the cup. Couldn't make a Whopper to save my life.
Oh, that's funny. It's like everybody starts off in food, I guess.
But I think more people need to start off in food because I see too many people who treat the people who work behind the counter like dirt.
Yeah.
And I think there yourself really gives you that empathy. Like, dude, there's nothing this poor girl can do. Like she's making her $10 an hour. Leave her alone.
Right. $10 an hour in Canada. Here it's like $8.
It doesn't go all the way.
Minimum wage is $15 up here.
It's what?
$15 is minimum wage.
Wow.
15?
15.
That's good.
That's really good.
Mm-hmm. What was your first job, Ash?
Yeah.
I worked at a water park.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Ooh,
I used to wear my swimsuit under my work clothes.
Yeah.
And go to the water park afterwards.
Nice.
It was a good first job.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better than mine.
That sounds like a YA novel premise, okay? Like
It's a cute rom-com.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Well, go ahead.
I worked there and then I worked the junior and senior year. I worked for the Grizzlies because I lived in Memphis at the time. And I worked there until I left for the military, and like the pay was crap. But then in the summer, you would like randomly get this big check, and I was like, ooh, you know, it's like $500 is a big deal. And I'm like, what did I do with my money? Because I was never that kid that like, bought expensive stuff. Like I would go to Gadzooks or you know, those stores that we had once upon a time. And to me, you spend $100 and you get as much as you can instead of like paying for $100 pair of jeans.
Yeah.
I just loved having my own money. I can't wait for my kids.
Yeah. I just can't. I mean, I was in such a rush to grow up when I was like 16 and 17, and oh my gosh, now I'm like, why? Why didn't I enjoy it?
What's your dream job? And do you feel like you've worked it, or are you working it?
I'm working my dream job.
Yes, you are meant to be a librarian, Ash.
Yeah, I'm working my dream job right now. Yeah, I can't complain about that. I think I told y'all before, like, how competitive like library jobs are, and then the more specialized I get, the more competitive they get. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to leave.
You could one day teach the library science course.
Oh no, someone asked me that and I was like, they're like, do you want to go back and get your PhD SS for what? So I can teach library information science? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Sarah, what's your dream job?
Realistically, like we all have that, you know, I'd love to publish a book one day. Will that happen? Who knows? But realistically,
Sure.
I do really enjoy what I do without divulging. I know you ladies know what industry I work in, but for, you know, I actually get to help people on a daily basis, and that makes me happy. And I'm, you know, I'm not one of those people to pat myself on the back, but I think I'm good at what I do. I'm customer service. You know, it's natural for me. It's to be that person. And if you work with the public, you need to have a certain attitude, you know, like,
Yes, you do.
right. And I'm lucky that I do have it, and I enjoy what I do. If I won the lottery tomorrow, would I quit my job? Hell yes.
Yeah.
But if this is what I have to do until I retire, I'm absolutely happy with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely have a voice. Like if I called with an issue, I hope you're the person that answers.
Yeah.
I tell story to people that I was with a couple friends of mine. We were driving to Chicago. This was a couple years ago, and someone had called my cell phone. I was in the passenger seat of the car, and it was somebody was being delivered to the house. And I answered the phone like I always would, and I'm like, "Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm having, you know, very pleasant, very polite." And I finished the conversation on the phone. And the driver turns to me and she goes, "You really do customer service, don't you? Like just that I was at work for." That's kind of what I do.
What's yours, Bree?
Yeah, Bree.
I don't know, y'all.
That's such a good question.
I
That's a
don't
hard answer.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't either.
And I know people like y'all that have taught who are just like,
I know.
I think that is my dream job in a different world. Like, or maybe, I mean, I don't know, a private school. I don't know anything about private schools, but like in a world without all the politics and things that go into teaching, at its like in theory, teaching is what I would love to be doing. And so then I'm like, well, maybe I am doing my dream job. I'm parenting, and I'm, you know, if I could maybe I would homeschool or something, but I don't, there's all sorts of thoughts on that, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I love kids and teaching, and I mean, I don't know. It's everything else that goes with it.
I just remember like a couple weeks ago, Allie Dunn posted on her Instagram stories, like this kid called her a liar. I think he probably skipped school or something, who knows? And I was just like, I don't think my attitude is adjusted the right way to not respond the wrong way. And I've really been thinking like, is this what I want to do? You know, I don't know. But my mom is like 50 and she's in nursing school now. She's like a year left, which is great. But like for her, I have that fear of like, did you wait too late? You know, you're already physically having issues. To be able to lift people and move people. And I don't want to wait too late to figure it out.
Yeah, I've always thought like orthopedic nursing or like OB nursing or something would be really fun. Just being able to help people, and yeah, I think that would be great.
Reason he said private schools are just the same as public, just with kids who think they're more privileged than you.
Yep.
Probably true.
I went to private school for like 2 years, y'all.
You did.
They are worse than public.
I think
They
so.
are.
My dream has always been to be a mom, but that hasn't happened. So nannying is filling that part of my life. I think nannies are godsends as well, because now having kids, I'm like, I don't like other people's kids in the same way that I would. Like, I don't think I could do full-time like nanny care. At school, it's different, but nannies, I think, are undervalued as well.
When we were both working, that pretty much walked Kaysen, because Asia and Jace were in school. And I mean, Kaysen learned to count. He could write his name. I mean, we're still waiting on him to go to kindergarten. She was teaching him Spanish. She was just a godsend. Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, they are amazing. Well, what else you got, Bree? You were good at questions.
I hit all of my general questions. My biggest thing was like, how can we support the library at a time when we can't really go?
Check stuff out.
Yeah.
Like check, and I always tell people that in general. Yeah, I mean, whether that's digitally or whether that's physically, those numbers are super important. And I think, but I've heard a couple people say like, oh, I don't want to check stuff out and then I don't read it. And I'm like, we don't care because we're not tracking whether you read the book or not. We're looking to see like how many books are circulating, and those circulating numbers prove that people are using and valuing their libraries, which I don't think people realize. You know, I tell people max out how many books. I mean, if you could keep up with it, because I understand not being able to keep up with all the books if you have like a high checkout limit. But when it comes down to funding, those numbers are taken into consideration, which is that cycle of people saying like, oh, I don't use my library because my library sucks. I was like, well, your library sucks because nobody's advocating for their funding. And until you help advocate and you talk to your local politicians or, you know, your state politicians or whoever, you know, they're not going to ever fund your libraries because they don't think that people are using it, and they think that people don't feel like it's important to their communities. So even though you can't physically go in, all libraries at this point are providing some sort of curbside pickup or digital services or something. Like, use that, because even during this time during COVID, we're keeping track of those numbers. Like, everything for us is about statistics and making sure we're seeing how many people are even using the library now during a global pandemic. It's very, very important.
Well, and people who do say my library sucks and yada yada, I never have asked or like suggested a purchase until COVID, and I have now, and they have been so kind and so responsive and so at least attempt to accommodate that if you don't see something that you want, ask. I mean, the worst they can do is say no.
Yeah, always ask, and it's true. The worst that they can say no, the worst thing that they can say is no, that they're not able to acquire that material. But I think I really don't know if people always know how libraries work. If people just go off of stereotypes and general perceptions, they may not know, like, most libraries do have a system where you can request a title, and a lot of libraries have library loans. So if they don't have it, they'll check in their state, and even if their state doesn't have it, they'll reach out to another state. Some libraries may be waiving postage fees right now. I don't know, because it varies. I know for us, I think if it's within the state, we don't ask people to pay postage fees at all. I think it's only when it starts like out of state stuff, then that's when it gets kind of tricky. But I think there's just a lot of options in terms of library use. It's not that we can't acquire it. We just may have to go about different ways. And, sometimes there are things that we may be like, hey, we just can't get that. But most librarians, y'all, are going to fight to get you what you need because they are about accessibility. They want to make sure that people have equitable access to materials, no matter what their socioeconomic status or situation currently is.
Mhm.
It's interesting, like both reading the book and talking to you, just how much of a helping profession it is. Like, I don't think you think that when you think of a stereotype, the stereotype of a librarian. I think you don't realize what helpers you are.
Yeah, it is. It's very much so. And Sarah, I like that you said it's customer service, really.
Really is.
All of it's customer service. And I think I've had somebody ask me, like, what is the most exhausting part of your job? And it literally is doing my job, not because it's the most difficult thing in the world, but maintaining that level of professionalism and maintaining that no matter what goes on in my background life, I can't bring that to work. If somebody curses me out, I'm still I had a lady, I've been cursed out plenty of times, more times than I can count to say I've been cursed out. It's just it doesn't faze me anymore. But one lady, like, she cursed me out so badly and said that I set her up because she was sleeping in the library. And I don't know if I've told y'all this story. I feel like I've told it on one of my lives probably, where there was a lady who she had a body part exposed because she fell asleep on the chair and her dress slid down. And, I had a couple of staff members say, hey, how do we handle this situation? And there was a guy who's sitting in the cubicle and he was like, I swear I'm not looking. I'm not looking at her. I'm not looking. Like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you're fine. And handling that situation. And, every library has rules about like sleeping and doing certain things in library. Like, you just can't do certain things. And people have like suspension stuff. And, she ended up falling asleep again. And I had to ask her to leave and told her she could come back in a week. And I mean, she cursed me out from here till Sunday. Like, you set me up. I wasn't sleeping. And I mean, was calling me everything but a child of God and everything that she was saying. And, I still had to be like, you know what? I apologize, ma'am. I really don't want to remove you, but this is part of our policy. And, be this and be that. And I was like, well, you be blessed. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Like, that is exhausting because literally True Ashley wanted to curse her clean out as well. And I'm like, I can't do that because it's very much so about empathy and meeting people where they are and being helpful and being kind and compassionate and caring. And when you do that for 7 to 8 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, by the time you get home, you're like, I don't want to talk to people.
Yeah.
Like, people like, why don't you come out on the weekend? I don't want to be around people anymore.
Draining.
Yes.
And yours is even harder because you are customer facing. You are, whereas I'm on the phone and I can be like, and they have no idea what I'm doing, right?
Yeah, and it's hard.
I just put the phone down. I'm just like, let me check my email.
And keeping a straight face is like probably the most challenging part of it because you're like, can't make it. Because my emotions are always on my face. So my job definitely has taught me, like, you can't go to work and have somebody say something to you and be like, did that really just come out your mouth? Like, it's literally, you have to have a smile on, like, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with a complete imbecile, but I can't say anything and I can't show that on my face. And you're smiling from ear to ear while somebody's just straight cursing you out. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. And I think I've only had one incident where I kind of like, I kind of broke my face because I started laughing because it was just so hilarious that what they were saying. And I mean, they were threatening to sue me and they were getting their lawyer. And I just started laughing. I was like, this is crazy. Someone call the cops. Just call the cops. Because I can't do this anymore.
Oh my gosh, this reminds me of like my days of police dispatching and just like muting the phone and being like, this person's an idiot.
It is the craziest thing. It is crazy.
You're a kid and yet you want me to do what?
Exactly.
our family business is property management. And so we live in a college town. So there's college kids doing all sorts of crazy things. And that's where I worked for most of my high school and college. And they would come in and we had one couple that came in and she called him daddy. And the whole time is calling him daddy or whatever. Well, they were in there because they broke their shower doing stuff that I didn't 18-year-old me was like, what do I say to this? Like, wait, so you pulled the shower head off doing what?
Wow.
Yeah. And
Jungle remake?
They flooded their apartment, the apartment below. They straight up broke the pipe off. And stuff like that. And I'm like, what? And then we had a big outbreak of people self-installing bidets. Which are, butt sprayers is what they're called. And they are self-installing them. No, I didn't either until I had to Google it because we're having all these plumbing issues and it's people that are international students trying to self-install butt sprayers. Mm-hmm. And we're like, you can't do that.
We don't get those here in America.
And when that was all going on, it's so hard not to laugh and to be like, how do I can't even say the word.
You have to maintain your professionalism.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Steph said things she reads about.
I guarantee that's in somebody's book that somebody's read.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This has been, Debbie said, I didn't realize until I read this book how much a librarian does besides check out books. Yes, I think we've all learned something today.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
I wish it was like that some days where all I did was sit at a desk and scan in and scan out and scan in. Yeah, it's definitely
reading and
That's what I was gonna say. Somebody in school literally said I should just be a librarian so I can sit and read all day, and I'm like,
yeah, no,
pretty sure that's not what they do, but.
And now we know.
I wish I sat around all day and just read.
Well, and that being the public perception is of course you don't get any respect because they think you're sitting around reading all day. No.
And now that I think about it, it's probably from a lot of people that don't actually use the library. People that simply go and be like, no.
Yeah.
It is the people who don't use a library that hold these stereotypes. And I'm like, no, that's not what we do. I promise you, I don't have the luxury of sitting at a desk and reading a book all day because usually I'm in meetings all day or I'm doing programming or I'm sitting at a computer helping somebody with a job application for 2 hours. It's like,
yeah,
I wish if I'm lucky and I'm shelving, I can listen to an audiobook if I'm lucky. But when you start changing positions, your responsibilities change. Absolutely. So when you go in, you do a lot of that shelving and checking in and checking out, and you're starting to learn how to do programs and, you're doing a lot of, patron assistance. But, the more that when you start looking at librarian positions or in our system, and I think for most systems, once you're a librarian, you're a supervisor. So then it becomes managing people.
Yeah. Yes.
And the smaller your location, so in the past couple of years, I've had to teach myself, how do I manage this group of people who have personalities and everybody doesn't necessarily want to work in a library for the rest of their life. So it is an interesting field that, is closely associated with books, but I tell you, it goes so much past that. Yeah, it goes so much past that.
Sure. Can I ask one? I promise this is the last one.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. So we do online book stuff, right? So then in the real world, you're coming up with programs to encourage people. Can you talk about that? Because I feel like in some kind of way, you're always encouraging people to read. You're recommending books here on the internet. And then how hard is that in real life with the programs. Like, what are your programs about? Like, can you talk about programs?
Yeah. So pre-COVID or COVID or both? Both. Both. Okay, I got you, Brie. Okay. So pre-COVID, I did, mostly, I did mostly teen programming, and I mean, I've done a little bit of everything. I've done adult programming, I've done children's programming, I've done it all. I'm Storytime trained across. I mean, so for kids, a lot of what we do, starting early literacy in terms of programming, is definitely Storytime. We encourage families, bring your kids to Storytime. After we had Storytime, hold on, y'all could probably hear her motorcycle. Okay. So usually what we do is we encourage people to check out books when they're out at Storytime. So we have books out. We tell parents, check books out. And believe it or not, this is just for the kids. It is hard to get parents to check out books for their kids in certain areas. Believe it or not, we have parents who tell us stuff like, and I get it, because a lot of times people have had bad experiences with libraries in the past where, and it's just part of human bias where people have been treated differently. So people don't feel as comfortable. You have people who come to libraries and they don't know what to do. They come in with their kids and they're like, I know I'm supposed to be here, but I don't know what to do. And unless you have somebody there saying like, can I help you? Or you're pushing like, if you read to your kid 20 minutes a day, it'll help them, whenever they get into grade school. Or did you know that your child learns up to like 90 or 95% of all the words that they will ever learn by the time that they turn 5? Mm-hmm. So we have to learn, I don't want to say literacy tactics, but literacy facts like that to try to persuade some parents to even check out books. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes, people are like, I really don't want to check anything out. My kid is going to tear up the book. So we work on a policy where we say like, your kid tears up the books, we're not going to charge you for it because it happens. It's life. We would rather your kids walk out of here with 20, 30 books and, they tear up 1 or 2 and it's not a big deal. For our teens, they're a special group. Because teenagers in general are special. They're my favorite group of kids to work with. I think they're so grossly misunderstood. And what you'll see is that a lot of libraries, they have what's called a teen advisory board. So the teen advisory board, literally what happens is you go to your high schools or your middle schools, because depending upon where you work, like for me, I work with 12 to 19. I extended it out to 19 because there are high schoolers who are 19 years old who have not graduated yet. They could have been held back or their birthday could be late. So you bring them in, and as the teen advisory board, what they end up doing is they determine what type of programs they want to see at the library. So I did that at one location, but it was different. And I could only speak to my personal experience because everybody's is a little differently. I worked in, my first position was in a middle to upper class area, looking at most likely 2-parent households, internet, at least 1 computer in the household. Okay. So a lot of my teens were coming to volunteer because they needed the hours for college applications, or their parents were like, you need to spend some time at the library, or they grew up in a household where reading was a very formative part of their education, childhood, whatever. I now work in a community where my kids are struggling to read and write. So I had to reframe all of that. I do not ask my kids to come in to volunteer. I do not ask my kids to come in and tell me what they want to do. What we did is we developed this program where we are teaching our kids soft skills. So like leadership, self-esteem, time management, diversity and inclusion, stuff that they may not necessarily be getting in the classroom. And I got a grant to do this. So every month what we were doing is we would choose a different theme. And then we would have a core class that would teach them about this theme. And then we would have 3 or 4 programs within that month that would relate directly to that theme. So like, let's say our theme for the month was self-esteem or self-image. We would then have just different programs that focus on things that were related to self-esteem, like, taking care of yourself, like learning how not to stress, especially being in high school. So we had like a de-stressing festival where we taught them different activities and coping skills that would help them if they ever got stressed out. So we were doing that, and we're still doing it now, but it's changed since COVID. And when we were doing it then, we made sure we always had a literacy component, but we did literacy components in a way that were accessible to our kids, because our kids are not reading on grade level. None of my kids read on grade level. And it's very hard for me because that's when kind of the teacher side kicks in a little bit. But I don't have the time to invest the way that a school would have time to invest. So we're doing the same things, except now we're creating take-home kits, which I've connected with the school, and they're giving me the names of kids that they think would benefit from the program the most. And they actually get everything that we would do in person, but in a box in the form of a kit. Because this is just me personally. Every child does not receive the same level of education. So every child is not prepared to go to a 4-year college or university. Mm-hmm. I feel like my job in my community is prepare my kids when they walk out of secondary school, whether they decide to go to a 2-year community college or a 4-year university or college, or whether they decide to go straight into workforce, or whether they decide to go, military. I want to make sure that they have the skills that way that they can function around other people and be successful no matter what path they end up taking. Because a lot of my kids were going to college and dropping out because they were not ready for college yet. So a lot of what you do in terms of programming has to deal with what community you're working in. And in school, they teach you have to do a community analysis. So the community that I'm working in did not have a library until 2 years ago. Like I started when the library was getting built. And I did a community analysis, meaning that I was looking at what my demographics in my neighborhood looked like. I was reaching out to schools. I was pulling test scores. I was seeing what graduation rates were looking like. I was seeing how many of my kids were dropping out. And it's tough. In my job right now, it is tough. It's rewarding, but it's difficult because my kids are not where my other kids were.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because they're all in the same county. And it's even more distressing for me because there's a school that's 7 minutes down the street in the same district. And you can see the disparity between the two schools. How one group of kids are super prepared. They don't really need me, but to work in a community now where my kids depend upon me. I mean, I had kids coming in and spending the entire day with me because their parents were locking them out of their houses. And not because they were being cruel, but because their parents had to work. And they weren't going to leave their child in their household because it's a trust thing. Like, I don't want anybody coming in and out of my house, but I also can't take you to work with me. So I had kids who were coming and spending the entire day with me at the library, and I would make sure I was using grant money to be able to feed them during the day. So programming for me is probably a little atypical because I work with a different population, but every librarian is going to tell you, you have to know your community before you do any type of programming.
So advertising and marketing for that, is that just based on people who are already in the library, and how do you
That's
guys
another, even within my system, people will disagree with me on this, but I stand my ground because there's some things that I'm very, very adamant about, and I don't care who's above me, who's beneath me, whatever the case may be in terms of ranking. I'm going to say what I need to say. And for me, we have marketing. So there's stuff that goes up on the website. There's, emails that are sent out, text alerts. But I work in a community that doesn't have access to internet.
Yeah, computer.
So what posting on a website, what text alert, what email is going to do them any good? So we pass out flyers. I literally will go up to people and say, hey, I'm having this event. It's free. I have X, Y, and Z coming, going on. Come in or come do this. And when we did the kickoff event for the program that I started, I mean, we had close to 50 kids show up, teenagers now, which is that's a lot for not school mandated. You're not required to come, but we hustled because we knew that this was something that these kids needed. So for us, it's very much so in the community that I work in, it's very much so word of mouth and convincing these kids that they're getting something out of it, because they're not going to come if they feel like, well, I'm back in school, like I don't want to be here, I'm not getting anything out of this. You have to frame it so it's like, here's what you get out of it. These are the benefits that you're going to see. And sometimes I can't even tell them like, oh, I'm going to help you, increase your self-esteem. They don't care about that right now. They're not, but I have to frame it to where they are learning about their self-esteem. They're starting to think about themselves in a better way, but they see themselves getting something else out of it in the long run, whether that's food, whether they get to play games or they get to come and hang out. Like, I made sure we have 2 PS4s and an Xbox One, because I knew that that's what my kids wanted, and I did, before we did this, I went, instead of just talking to adults, I went to the schools and I held like, it's not like a Q&A, but you know how like marketing companies they'll pull people in to kind of figure out like what direction they should go in. We did the same thing. We sat down, we reached out to the schools and said, hey, can we meet with a group of your kids? And we'd ask them, what do you think about the library? Everybody look around like, oh gosh, I don't know if I really, and I'm like, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, it's boring. It's always quiet. There's nothing for us to do. And then we knew that we were headed in the right direction when we had she couldn't have been more than like 13. And she said, well, I want to come to the library and learn things about real life. She said, like, I know what credit is. I know it's important. Mama won't tell me why it's important to manage credit. She said, I don't know anything about it, but she's like, I feel like I need to know stuff like that. And most of my kids don't. They don't know anything about credit or finances or what happens after you leave high school and you start dibbling, dabbling in this and that and how that can affect you down the road. They don't know any of that because they may not have that at home. Some of my kids are the parents at home. So long-winded answer, but for me, it's very, very unique. And I have to think out of the box a lot with my job in terms of trying to get them to read and trying to get them to come to programs.
That is awesome.
And overwhelming.
Yes.
It's a lot for you.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot.
Yeah, and you've got a 14-month-old baby.
Yeah. So I think that's the question always is, well, how do you do all this stuff? You're doing BookTube, you're a mom, you do this, you do that. And for me, I always tell people, I was like, we're all given the same 24 hours in a day. It just depends on how you use it. That's it. Time management is key.
Absolutely.
Well, you just don't get to come home to quiet, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, it's some days I'm like, oh, I mean, even this month, I left is a day or two. I left work and I was like, oh, I'm finally off. And I'm like, wait. I still got a child to go pick up from daycare. I'm not really off just yet. I just got to switch jobs.
Yeah. The second shift.
It's the second shift. It's a different job. It's just a completely different job.
That's what have you heard the phrase of like, once you have kids, you don't have vacations, you have trips. Like, and just like this weekend, like for me anyway, it's like, yes, it's a holiday weekend, but I still have 2 kids under 2 and
right,
it's not relaxing.
It hasn't. And this one, she got her flu shot, and y'all, she fell apart. She was already sick. She had a small cold, and then she got her flu shot, so it just has made everything. She's been running a fever for like the past 2 days. So it's just like, Thanksgiving break. I said, what break?
Yeah, right.
I just don't have to work the first job. That's it.
I'm just mad that my kids are on Thanksgiving break and they technically have not been back to school since spring break of the last.
That's true.
Yeah. It is a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley.
Yes,
brain.
You taught us a lot. And this book, we didn't really talk about the book that much, but because there's not a whole lot to say except, these details about libraries that I like. I feel like this book was good for like opening eyes in general to like all the things that go on in the library, both funny and like actually how many hats you wear.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you guys. Thank you to everybody here, and thank you, Ashley, for joining us. It was fun.
Thank you, baby girl, for letting us talk to you.
It was very, very good. Oh, better, sweetie. Okay. Bye.
Bye, y'all.